A new poll shows Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has a fight on his hands to hold on to his Senate seat. The latest numbers have Democrat Allison Lundergan Grimes neck and neck with McConnell. Democrats are pushing hard for Grimes in Kentucky, funneling $650,000 in television ad money. The long-shot candidate quickly gained ground on McConnell in a state that typically skews red. The Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee says undecided voters are leaning toward Grimes. But that's not deterring the McConnell camp, though. They say poll numbers underestimate the senator's popularity among men. Still, it's a risky move for the DSCC, given the number of endangered Democratic seats in the Senate needed to maintain a majority.
The United States is investigating reports that a second American fighting with ISIS in Syria was killed in a shootout over the weekend. The State Department isn't confirming the announcement made by a coalition of Syrian rebels. But it did say 33-year-old American Douglas MacArthur McCain was killed alongside ISIS fighters. Investigators were aware that McCain was in Syria to fight with the militant group. Meantime, President Obama has ordered surveillance flights over Syria. The move could pave the way for airstrikes against the Islamic State group.
Congress is wasting no time this week on a bill that would give President Obama approval to arm Syrian rebels. The measure would give Obama the authority to equip and train moderate rebels who oppose both Islamic State militants and Syria's government. However, it does not provide the funding Obama requested. Arguments begin today in the House of Representatives with a vote expected Wednesday.
We've heard members of Congress talk quite a bit about how important they think this effort is, and they should put their vote where their words are, and hopefully we can get it done.
The plan is a big part of Obama's campaign to stop Islamic State militants. They've already seized control over large parts of Iraq and Syria. The measure is expected to be added to an amendment on a larger measure to fund federal agencies.
The U.S. Senate panel is looking to find ways to respond to the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And on Tuesday, they got a visit from an American who was infected with the virus. Dr. Kent Brantley spoke at a hearing, expressing his disapproval with the response so far.
This unprecedented outbreak received very little notice from the international community until those events of mid-July when Nancy Wright-Bowl and I became infected.
Earlier that day, Brantley talked with the president about ways to stop the epidemic.
The U.S. government and drug maker GlaxoSmithKline are announcing the start of human trials of an Ebola vaccine today. It's one of several vaccines being developed against Ebola, but the first trial to be tested on humans. The National Institutes of Health is fast-tracking the testing because of the outbreak devastating 3 West African countries. More than 1,400 have been killed by the Ebola virus, making it the worst outbreak in history.
Anger keeps bubbling over near Ferguson, Missouri, where protests continue over the shooting death of an unarmed black teenager. Early this morning, police shot and critically wounded a man who drew a weapon near a protest site. They also fired tear gas into the crowd of protesters who confronted a line of cops. The incidents followed 2 nights of violence, looting, and arrests in the St. Louis suburb. It was sparked when 18-year-old Michael Brown was gunned down by an officer Saturday afternoon. The details of the shooting remain unclear. Police say Brown went for the officer's gun. A friend who was with him at the time of the shooting says that's not true. Ferguson's mayor spoke this morning to explain why the officer's name hasn't been released.
It is protocol that we would not release that information until this individual is charged. Obviously, there's also concern for the officer's life. There has been death threats to many of our officers.
The FBI has started an investigation, joined by the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Adrian Peterson won't be playing against the New Orleans Saints this Sunday. In a written statement released early Wednesday, the Vikings announced they placed the star running back on leave. The move bars Peterson from any team activities indefinitely, while he handles legal matters stemming from a child abuse complaint. Peterson's accused of injuring his 4-year-old son after spanking him with a tree branch. If found guilty, he could face up to 2 years in prison and a $10,000 fine.
If the folks behind the Farmer's Almanac are to be trusted, we're in for a doozy of a winter.
The latest edition of the 198-year-old publication is calling for a colder and wetter winter for most of the country.
The cold never bothered me anyway.
And if you thought the polar vortex was a thing of the past, brace yourself. The Farmer's Almanac is predicting more of the same this season. The sub-zero temperatures brought record cold snaps to the United States. Lake Michigan even broke a 41-year-old record for most ice cover. The formula behind the Farmer's Almanac is a secret. It's said to be based on the position of planets in our solar system, the movement of tides, and sunspot activity. So it's no surprise that it's drawn criticism from more conventional scientific organizations. Either way, we'll see who comes out on top this winter. The National Weather Service is forecasting normal to somewhat warm weather for early 2015.
Turning now to an American who's taking the fight against ISIS into his own hands, despite the disapproval of his own government.
Meet Jordan Mattson, a former United States soldier who has spent the last month waging his own war against ISIS. The 28-year-old Wisconsin native traveled into Syria from Turkey, pretending to be a doctor. In reality, he was getting ready to fight with Kurdish forces against the Islamic State. Once he was in, his service started with a bang, literally. Mattson found himself pitted against ISIS forces almost instantly.
The second day in, I got hit by a mortar on a fight.
While recovering, Mattson found a new way to volunteer, recruiting. He's using social media to call on others interested in joining the People's Protection Units, or YPG. Mattson is one of 3 confirmed Americans fighting with YPG in Syria. While U.S. law enforcement officials say it is illegal for U.S. citizens to join the Syrian militia, that didn't stop Mattson from heading east.
All my life, I just wanted to be a soldier. I guess growing up, and I'm at peace being here.
More than 800 people have been killed in the last month and a half as forces clash over control of the border city of Kobani.